Thank you. All right, an update on the revised schedule. Our next presenter is Eleanor McKinney, who is a landscape architect who owns Landscape Architect Incorporated, and she's been working with University of Texas, and she's done sustainable development projects with City of Austin as well. She's also got a background with the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center and with a high school campus in El Paso, Texas. She's done several different institutional and commercial projects for other design firms as well. So Eleanor is going to speak until 2:30, then we'll have a brief break and our last two presenters. So I hope that schedule works for you guys. We'll have you guys out by 4 p.m. Thank you, and I'm very happy to introduce Eleanor McKinney. Thank you very much, Eleanor.
Am I on? Good. Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Where am I? Okay. Good to see y'all. I'm glad you were able to come out after it was so, didn't know if we were going to have ice today or not. My name's Eleanor McKinney. I'm a landscape architect. I've actually been practicing since '93. And worked on not only the Wildflower Center as project landscape architect under Bob Anderson, but also worked on the City Hall right here. And it actually is a certified wildflower habitat. So it was the first City Hall in the country that was certified as a wildlife habitat. So just kind of putting that out there so you can go around. And you may not know this, but this particular landscape reflects the ecosystems in Central Texas. So the western side of the landscape is represented the Edwards Plateau. Eastern side is Blackland Prairie and kind of coming in, and also Post Oak Savanna. So the cool thing about working on this project is that the architect had so many different spaces, and the overhang that is out north by Austin, Java, is actually supposed to be like Hamilton's Pool, with the overhang, and so we were able to put plants in that might be around Hamilton's Pool. So there's a lot of different niches that aren't available in a lot of landscapes to be able to have. So if you can kind of go around and see different things, you might get some interest going. Okay, so let's see, where am I? So the talk is on green infrastructure and sustainable water management. How many people are aware, and I'll like a show of hands, of Imagine Austin, what that means? So less than half. Okay, so Imagine Austin is our new comprehensive plan. It was passed a couple of years ago by the council. It was developed by staff and citizens, and the comprehensive plan has there's eight priority programs. One is Compact and Connected, but there are two other ones. Green infrastructure and sustainable water management are other two, as well as Healthy Austin, which is another one. So luckily we have quite a lot to go by. This is mainly on commercial properties, but I'm hoping that the impetus of green infrastructure and sustainable water management will go toward the residential properties as well. So green infrastructure has many different component parts: existing trees and vegetated cover, streetscapes, rain gardens, green roofs, green walls. And so you may start to hear about what this term, so I'm trying to kind of bring this forward. So Imagine Austin has a promise. That promise is to integrate green infrastructure elements such as the urban forest, gardens, green buildings, stormwater treatment, infiltration facilities, and green streets through the urban design, throughout the urban design through green development practices and regulations. So this is an amazing statement for a comprehensive plan that we actually have this in Imagine Austin. And again, I'm hoping that it gets down to the residential level as well. So why is green infrastructure important? Probably everybody in this room understands that, but I'm going to go through it. It basically has to do with slowing down urban runoff. So if you look at this, what happens is that we get As we have more impervious cover over a surface, there's greater runoff to the creeks, and that runoff is not being treated by existing trees and plants and soil. So the last kind of bar, second to last bar over there says residential at 38% impervious cover. Our single-family residences are actually at 45% impervious cover. And this one, the urban district, is 85. Well, our urban districts can be 95 to 100% impervious cover. So just looking at what the runoff is doing really affects the health of our creeks. So what does runoff lead to? It leads to flooding. And so on the left, that's the Onion Creek flood, and people lost their homes and lives. Also, that same time was, everybody saw Ladybird Lake come up around the Stevie Ray Vaughan statue. But the first time we understood about urban runoff was in the May '81 flood, in which 13 people were killed because Shoal Creek came up. And that was the first time we realized as a city that the increase of impervious cover actually had an impact downstream. That's when all our watershed protection ordinances came into play. So another element is the urban heat island. I'd like a show of hands of the people that have been here before 1980, let's just say. Okay, so in the 70s, because I was here in 72, it was a lot cooler than it is now in the urban core. And so we have watched the urban heat island increase, and that is again through increased density. So this is a projection that toward a climate resilient Austin that came as a report to council May 1st, 2014, that our average annual temps by 2071 are expected to go up 9 to 10 degrees from where we are now. The summer high could go up to, instead of 94 degrees, it's 98 to 103, average summer high. The number of days over 100 could go to 35 to 80. Number of summer days over 110 could go up to 20. The precip kind of stays the same, but of course how it occurs is different. Number of days with 2-inch rainfall, max with 5-inch rainfall. So as we know, this is flash flood alley, and we're getting more and more concentration of rainfall and then drought in between. So there's a max consecutive dry days now at 52 that could go up to as much as 70 to 75. How many of y'all know that they're looking at stage 3 water restrictions right now? Not show of hands. That's more about 50% of y'all. Well, they're looking at them. And water utility is preparing for it now. As we've read in the paper, the LCRA didn't estimate correctly. They actually have less storage than they thought in the lakes. So all this is going to affect the landscape and irrigation industry and probably everyone in this room. So, and that's with the urban heat island and how much evaporation moisture is coming out of the plant material. How are these plants going to survive? So we also have pollution. And that is mitigated by the preservation of the urban forest and vegetative cover, installation of more green landscape, and innovative stormwater solutions. So just looking at these solutions, we really need to start thinking about them in our home landscapes as well. So we have, in our neighborhoods, we have in the infill neighborhoods, in the suburban neighborhoods, the trees are smaller, but infill neighborhoods have existing trees and vegetative cover that have mitigated our urban heat island. We're about at 30% vegetative cover. Nationwide, they estimate that in terms of the shade from the existing trees, nationwide they recommend 40% shade cover from trees. So planting trees, obviously shade trees is very important, and maintaining the ones that we have. So in other cities in the country, they've come up with things that are important, such as green streetscapes, as well as existing trees and preservation. So this is Seattle, and they actually have said that not only are trees along the street, which you've kind of seen planted around town with plants underneath are important, but also adjacent to buildings. So they've set the buildings back from the right-of-way line so that more planting can go here between the street and the sidewalk so that the pedestrian experience is just a lot more human. So also rain gardens at One Texas Center. Do y'all know where One Texas Center is? Everybody, raise your hands. One Texas Center. That's pretty good. It's down there at South First and Barton Springs Road. There is a rain garden there that was developed by Watershed Protection, and kind of showing what plants will go into rain gardens and how important it is to retain the stormwater on site. I'll bump my back up here. There's also an example rain garden at Stacy Park. Anybody know where that is? Stacy Park, maybe. Anyway, y'all have seen it. So it can, again, kind of show you, what you're doing. So how many people have put rain gardens into home landscapes here? That's pretty good. Okay, so that's going to be more and more important. They're starting to look at in other cities around Austin that no more than 7,000 square feet can be in turf, okay, to reduce the water requirements. Looking at rain gardens for stormwater. How do we retain that stormwater on site is going to become more and more critical, not only for existing neighborhoods, but kind of outside. And I think that there's going to be greater and greater need to do this, not only for prevent downstream flooding, but also just to, have the water remain on site for use of plant material. So here's a project that's in near South Austin off of near Cardinal Lane, called Villa Court, in which the rain garden is kind of in the middle of some single-family homes that were designed with low lot lines, basically, as a complex. So, starting to look at aggregating rain gardens rather than just having, and then they also were behind in the backyards as well. So there is going to be a push coming from Watershed Protection about these rain gardens, and homeowners associations are going to, in the future, going to have to verify that these rain gardens are being maintained, that you might design and install. So just kind of letting you know what's coming down the pike. And of course, in front yards as well, having the rain gardens. All of these items that we're talking about can offset the increased impervious cover. So whether or not y'all are, as you come into a project, you're aware of that impervious cover right now, you will need to be in the future. And to what percent of hardscape that you might be putting in might affect that overall cumulative impervious cover. Yes?
Is Imagine Austin, do they mention anything about green roofs?
Yes, we'll get to that. Okay. Actually, we're going to get to that. So, green roofs? What do you know? Very good. I didn't know that was next. So, actually that's something I focused on because I am a green roof professional. It's accredited nationally. And green roofs above grade at Chicago City Hall and at grade at Austin City Hall. This particular landscape area outside is actually over the parking garage, as a lot of people know. And so that is actually considered a green roof because it's over structure. It's the same kind of structural requirements that you would have over an occupied space. So the public benefits are reduction of the urban heat island effect, stormwater management. Again, green roof is a stormwater best management practice, stormwater reuse, aesthetic value, wildlife habitat, as we discussed earlier. It's actually, I'll kind of go back to that. It has been interesting to see the wildlife kind of move into City Hall. It was first opened in 2005, and so then to see it kind of come in has been really rewarding. So I'm going to give you a few examples of green roofs and kind of going more into that than in some of these other examples of the elements. But we had 12,500 feet of green roof space, the outdoor plaza over the parking garage, and also roof terraces over occupied space. There are 3 or 4 roof terraces going up outside the city manager's office, mayor's office, and council members' offices. And streetscapes are at grade, raised planters, large tree relocation. I think the largest diameter tree we had bring on here was 11 inches, and the root balls were 4 feet, about 4 feet deep. And so we had, the interesting thing about that is we had the structural engineers were designing the parking garage underneath, and they were, because we came in early, they were able to lower the height of the parking garage 5 feet below finished grade so that we could get those root balls in. If we hadn't been in early, we wouldn't have had those big trees. It was a major coup that they even asked us in the beginning what were the two important. They asked each sub-consultant what were the two most important things for the whole group to know, and that was one of them I talked about, and then the other one was maintenance and getting that maintenance contract in on time. Anyway, so all of them were Central Texas native plants, again, kind of describing the different ecosystems. Water efficient irrigation, we use drip. Drip is on all the upper terraces, and down below there's quite a lot of stream bubblers, for efficient irrigation. And HVA condensate was used for the waterfall. That's probably been turned off now, but for a while there it was rolling and it was on HVAC condensate. So here's kind of the site plan showing the different parcels, the different portions that were green. You can see the terraces going up. This doesn't have a laser on, I guess. Okay. And so kind of here you can see, this is early on, but you can see the terraces kind of climbing up. And the plant palette gets drier and drier as it goes up, as it would on a hill country terrace. And so we had to look at the mature tree weights over the parking garage, and the trees are which you can't see, but they're located no more than 5 feet away from a grade beam or a column, so that it'll take that ultimate structural weight. And here are the roof planters. Those were some persimmons. We lost one of the persimmons, but the other one did stay. Anyway, so water efficient strategies, we talked about that. Use of groundwater and city water. This is an interesting story. People had thought that we had hit groundwater, and so that's what was going to be used to water all the plants, the irrigation here. And in our drawings and specifications, we had toggles to city water just in case. Of course, they decided they didn't need the toggles to city water, and so they eliminated that during design. Anyway, what happened was they ended up, a few years later, they were repairing the water main down Cesar Chavez, and when they repaired it, all of a sudden there was no more quote-unquote groundwater because it had been a leak from the main line. And so then people were saying, well, you've got to have, it should be sustainable. You shouldn't have to water. And so the plants were dying. And so then we had, they finally did put the toggle into city potable water. Anyway, these are the things that happened, the stories, the war stories. Then we had an irrigation control room. We do have one. It's down in the parking garage. And that's kind of based on UT, where they have all the valves in the irrigation room so that you don't have to, so that people might not be vandalizing the valves outside. And so it's all there, and then copper piping out. And so we had irrigation problems the first month, and the irrigation contractor was calling everyone in, like 12 people, into a meeting, including the MEP engineer, anyway, everybody, and kind of looking at what was going wrong with the pump, and accusing the designers. And the MEP engineer said, and there were 14 people in this meeting, said, well, it looks like you installed the pump backwards. So there were, it's interesting how that turns around. So anyway, like I said, stream bubblers and drip irrigation. So when you go into some of these technologies that are not as common, then you start to see some of these issues. Just noticing them. So Sterling House is a project that is multifamily. You see a lot of multifamily complexes going up around town. And we had 9,780 square foot of green roof space. It was an outdoor courtyard over a podium-style parking garage. We have arbors with ceiling fans in lieu of trees because we couldn't put the structural weights in there. Outdoor shower, raised planters, native and adapted plants. Again, in that situation, they wanted adapted plants that were more evergreen during the year than native plants, which was the philosophy for City Hall. Okay, so this is their green roof. It's actually a zoysia lawn, which is pretty drought tolerant. And you can see the arbors with the evergreen vines over them. Right, that was earlier before the vines kind of started to cover them, but it was, native and adapted plants. So the primary issues here were that we did, again, for structural weight, we could do no trees, and we actually put the arbors on the perimeter where the perimeter beams would be. The planting soil, I raised the beds to 21 inches and then 12 inches for the lawn, so all raised. And then the drainage systems, we did have a few issues with that. But we had drip irrigation and drought-tolerant plants. I will say that we did have some issues with the fact that in West Campus, this was in West Campus, there were no storm sewers in West Campus when all these storms went in. And so we could not connect a storm, which meant that the water just ran down the alley. And I got the call that said, this water looks really dirty coming off of the roof. And I'm going, I know exactly what it is. It's the compost and the planting mix, that's coming out as compost tea. So I would never have seen that if it hadn't been disconnected. And so so it alerted me to the fact that if you're going to do a green roof and you're going to have compost in your mix, which is an important thing to have, that maybe the best thing to do is just to use that water to irrigate the at-grade landscape and keep the nutrients, again, on site instead of having them run down alley. It would have been simple if I'd known that. You have a question?
I'm curious how the green roof ties into the impervious cover in terms of.
The city doesn't acknowledge it yet as pervious. Is that answer your question? Yeah. There's a whole lot of conversation. I was chair of the Green Roof Advisory Group that had our recommendations back in 2011. Watershed Protection is not sure that it's pervious yet. But we could demonstrate that the City Hall actually retained 5 inches of rainfall at peak flow. But because they don't have any monitoring devices on City Hall, they won't acknowledge that that's true. So there's still a learning curve within city departments. Okay, please do ask questions. It's all pretty interesting out here. Okay, so Zarsky House, this is residential, which might be interesting to y'all. It's roughly 1,100 square feet of extensive green roof. I'm sorry. The two I did before are called intensive because they're above 6 inches in depth. And then this one is 6 inches and below. So rooftop patio cost per square foot approximately $24. So theirs is very drought tolerant. They water with a hose. And so they really looked at plant palette that was pretty dry. And as you can see, actually Kathy Zarsky, her husband's a concrete contractor, so they designed it from the beginning to have a concrete deck that the green roof could go on. So anyway, there's lots of interesting things that have happened with this project as well. So it's infrequent hand watering, all natives, feathergrass, prickly pear, crossvine, pine muley, skeleton leaf goldeneye, agave, and nolina. And as you can see here, they do have a gutter, and it is what they use for the monitoring of the water runoff from this roof. And then there's green roof research that's going on at the Wildflower Center that some of y'all might know about. And they're looking at soil mixes, plant palettes, all different types of things there. So they put out a paper that showed that green roofs could affect the temperature profile, cooling the surface layers, and can retain significant amounts of rainfall, and needs to be designed to specific goals. So, thinking about what is the goal in your project you're working on. So, have y'all heard about green walls? Everybody kind of started to hear about green walls? And so there's actually two different types of green walls. One is a green facade. The vines on a trellis or overhanging or living walls with modular systems with planting soil and irrigation. There's a lot of green facades in Austin, not too many living walls. Does anybody know of a living wall in Austin, by the way? Okay. Could you speak up? And what system did you use? The modular system? I know, but what brand?
Livewall is the name of the company. It's up in
Livewall? Okay.
Minnesota where we got shipped from.
And what facade, what face was that on? North, south, east, west?
It faces the west and the north at the same time.
It'd be,
It's an outside L shape that faces the interior roof for the postpartum. So as you're waiting around for your child,
so there is some shading of it.
there is some shading of it, but only from the wall itself that shades. The north wall shades the west.
That's what I'm saying. Yep, okay. I'd be very curious to talk to you about that. So again, trellis support is, or clinging vines like fig ivy, much more common than trying to have the irrigation system work well enough on a living wall that it survives. So that's why I'm very curious. So again, there are container systems for living walls and overhanging as well. And these are pocket systems. This is actually up in Chicago, again, where it doesn't dry out as much as it would here in Austin. These are modular systems kind of coming in. So sustainable water management. No matter what we want to do, this is what we're going to all have to do. It's just where we are, and it's going to affect every one of us. And so these are kind of 5 different sources of water with on-site infiltration. No? Yeah, there we go. All right, very good. Okay, so these are kind of 5 topics we're going to talk about, which is on-site infiltration, rainwater harvesting, and I think that Dick Peterson's going to talk about rainwater harvesting later in more depth, so I didn't, just barely covered it. HVAC condensate, reclaimed water, and gray water. So the goals are to use rainwater wisely, conserve potable water use, improve water quality, and reduce downstream flooding again. So the first thing is downspout disconnection, and this was kind of interesting. Maybe y'all have done this where the downspout has been disconnected into a dry creek. How many have done that, like on a project site? Oh, good. There's starting to be more people kind of doing that. So that's going to be, critical to keep that water on site. And as you can see, it can be pretty aesthetically done. It doesn't have to just be a few rocks thrown out there, but you can, make an aesthetic treatment out of it. And then overland flow. Some of y'all might work on commercial sites in which, again, there's a big push to get the water into the medians instead of having it just run off again into a storm sewer. So another thing that would be before you came on, but having the inlet as typical standard is in the middle of the parking lot rather than go off to the sides. So the design and construction of the medians is going to start to be important so that you don't erode the sides of those medians as the water comes in. For instance, here is a median where the turf kind of starts to break it up, and then there's a gravel kind of swale down the middle. And then going to a biofiltration area or rain garden. And you can see here where they're just curb lengths, and so the water can go in all the way through without too much obstruction. And then undisturbed natural areas are going to be important as well, where you don't disturb every inch of the site. So how many have installed porous pavement on your properties? Not as many, but that's going to start to be important too. This is the Eco Creto, which you may have heard about, and which is a porous concrete. Creto, C-R-E-T-O, sorry, and that's getting better as a product. Some of them earlier on there were some more problems, but it is getting better as a product. And then just pavement that is maybe has openings, between the pavement pieces. Looking at reducing impervious cover. Maybe these are porous brick treatments. And this is a parking lot with bioswales, and what you can't necessarily see, but it's porous asphalt in the parking bays themselves, so that water that runs to those parking bays actually disappears. And so there's going to be quite a lot of push to have that come on. So rainwater harvesting, roof collection, again, Dick's going to go over this in a lot of detail, but types of storage facilities, different types, and I'll kind of go through them quickly. But the one on the right is actually mine, which is 2,000 gallons, and I can tell you that hardly covers that side yard. And so, where some of these others, maybe 5 and 10 gallon tanks, we're going to have to really start looking at rainwater harvesting and looking at underground cisterns. David Van Huysen is a civil engineer in town, and he's actually starting to recommend above ground tanks that then the overflow goes into underground cisterns that is then pumped so that you can retain all that water on site. So there's going to be more and more push for some of these underground cisterns, I think, as well. Then this is a green roof on the Austonian, and they were able to use all the HVAC condensate to irrigate the green roof. So that is huge when you think about that. On I think it was either 9th or 10th floor, they have these bladders that you can actually go into this mechanical room and hear the water dripping into these bladders. And so they're all the water that they need to irrigate that green roof is coming from the HVAC condensate.
Is there a push in Austin or in Texas in general for this? Because I feel like it's the largest untapped resource that we have, especially in the summer when everyone's cranking the AC and all the water. I see it dripping out of commercial establishment all the time, just straight into the concrete. I don't know why that hasn't been taken more advantage of.
Well, I think there will be more. As the prices go up, as the regulations tighten down, people are going to say, what are alternative water sources? And HVAC water is certainly one, and we're going to be the ones that are going to be directing it to the landscape. I believe that, downtown, a lot more people are putting in these HVAC bladders, where they're not having to pump that water up, right? It's actually coming down. And so that's going to be important. I know that I've got some HVAC water dripping to a separate rain barrel, right? And so that I'm able to use that water on site. But then I have that's on one side. On the other side, it's actually underground. So the problem is the retrofit. I think these alternative sources are going to be built in to new construction. And if you can get in early enough and talk to the builder or an architect owner, you can have some of these things built into where it's easier access. But retrofitting is going to be still a little more difficult. So reclaimed water also. So I couldn't agree with you more, but it's just going to be challenging. There are reclaimed water lines going, all over the city. There's issues with them still, but that's going to be important. UT, I designed a project in which the reclaimed water, it's designed to go on reclaimed water, but they still have issues getting that reclaimed water to the site at UT. But again, that's going to become more and more important. So, but if you look at the difference in the pricing, that alone is going to make a big difference. So if you look at single family, the summer rate, and this was a few years ago, was $12.19 per kilogallon, and then the off-peak rate for reclaimed is 1.17. So that's going to be a big deal. I have heard that San Marcos is actually, for all the new, is that right? I see somebody shaking their head up and down. For all the new subdivisions, they're getting reclaimed water. Okay, they're designing them in. So again, that's going to become, but that's citywide. They're looking ahead, which we haven't done so much in Austin. So of course, we need purple pipe considerations, drinking fountains, valve boxes, sprinkler heads, signs. It has to be 10 foot of separation from the potable water line, sleeves, and so there's quite a lot of things kind of going into that, but we'll be dealing with a lot more purple pipe. Whoops, I think that I missed one. Okay, so here's gray water. This is our largest supply that we could have, but that is really pushing at the state level to get that available. In Arizona, they actually, new construction, single family, has two different, a toggle that is required to be installed between the gray water and the potable water that allows a homeowner to use potable. Okay, so it's being built in as a requirement. I think it's in Tucson. It's somewhere in Arizona. So just think about the difference between that state and what we're, kind of trying to deal with here in Austin. So we have untreated wastewater from bathtub, shower, lavatories, laundry, and how much is kind of being wasted. And we have a potential savings of 40 to 90 gallons per day. Using sustainable water reduces pressure on the wastewater infrastructure, and it's a pretty reliable source. So again, it's going to take, and I don't know what organizations, how many people are a member of TNLA that are here? I would try to put your pressure on your TNLA people to go down to the state and try to make that happen, for Austin. Because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take these larger organizations going down. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm kind of, I guess, grandfathered. I think he was like 90-something, 98. I use my washing machine water to water my lawn, and it's just, it's simple. I'm grandfathered because it's a person, and it's just a water hose that goes underneath the house. But starting 2 years ago, and last year I did it strictly. I didn't water any way other than using my wash water, and my yard was great. I'm in Fredericksburg.
Fredericksburg. Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, you should actually write an article about that. Seriously.
I did. I just with
But there's letters to the editor. I mean, there's such a push right now to look at alternative water sources, for landscape and irrigation. I mean, the alternative for our industry is for somebody to just say, you will have no water and the landscapes will die. That's what's going to happen. So we really do need to kind of take a push at the state level. Yes, Denise?
On the water conservation day, Robertson County with Boston Water is
Super. I do know that the city has been pushing, but it's still the state is the barrier. And so what can we do there? Yes, sir?
No, I do not use bleach. And if I do, sometimes I do, but I make sure that when I do use bleach, I put it on the tap so it doesn't go to any of my plants. And I have a lot of roses, which roses don't care for the water coming out. It's a little bit alkaline, but I just supplement with a lot more acidic.
Okay. So I'm glad that the city's going to come and do another one with Austin Water Utility. I'm going to kind of go back, and maybe Dick will address this a little bit more on the rainwater, but my understanding that the new water rules require a backflow preventer on a tank. he's shaking his head. Anyway, it's another just layer that's kind of coming in. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that just because you have a rainwater tank doesn't mean that somebody does grandfather you now that the rules are there. So, I'm kind of love to have more discussion on alternative sources, but they have been looking at gravity-based systems and no backflow protection required at the meter if it's under 250 gallons per day. Anyway, allows the laundry to the landscape system. But I just really think the more of us that try to pressure that to happen, the sooner the codes are going to change. So they do have this auxiliary water permit. Is it Robert Stefani that's going to talk about that? Yeah, Denise. And so I'm going to let him talk more about that. But if you want to call him earlier before that happens, this is his number at 974-2199. Huh? No, I'm just reading it. And so see if he's all in favor of it, but see if he can help you kind of navigate that system with your builder. So I know we all know about efficient irrigation methods, but this is kind of to look at some of the things that are happening now with automatic irrigation controllers, computer tracking programs, soil moisture sensors, drip, and mulch. So how many of you have installed something like a baseline controller with soil moisture sensors and computer programs in your landscapes? 1, 2, 3, maybe 4? So this is kind of the latest technology. I'm not trying to, baseline is just the one I know about. And it is a soil moisture sensor that then, instead of the little mini click that's supposed to be a rain moisture sensor that doesn't ever work. I have one in my yard, doesn't work. This is actually going down and measuring the soil moisture so that you don't irrigate. So it shuts it off. Even though it's the controller's program to do that, it doesn't allow it to come on if you've got enough moisture in your soil. And you can actually, just a second, sir, and you can actually track it on the computer for your different stations. I investigated this for my own yard. I think it was about $2,000. Not so bad. I mean, it's kind of bad, but not so bad. And certainly worth consideration for a homeowner that might have their water utility bills just going up and up and up. Okay, you had a question? I'm sorry, could you speak up, please?
Several people have had these installed, and I was wondering if anybody has been looking for research based on different soil types and where they're actually affected. Because a lot of the systems, there's only one of them, but it doesn't seem to be effective unless there's one in every zone.
I've questioned that myself. I have questioned that. I know that I haven't installed, I want to do it, but I haven't installed it yet. I would at least have 2, one in the sun and one in the shade. So that, you're getting, because there's going to be different soil moisture depending on location in the yard. And I think that at least one in the sun and one in the shade would be important. I know, well, they have told me, I don't know this, but they've told me on, some commercial sites that they are putting it out more in different zones to make that work. All I know is that it's got to be better than what we have right now. That is just measured on a little mini click that doesn't even work in terms of measuring air moisture versus soil moisture. So I'd love to see more and more people and have feedback from the field kind of on this. Oh, okay, yes, sir. I'm sorry? If it's drip irrigation, it's not being correct. So that's the other part of it is the drip irrigation. Right. Well, I have had drip irrigation installed under turf that's successful. Okay, so it's a question of whether you're using pop-up spray heads or drip everywhere. Well, but that may change over time. I actually did a right-of-way project in which we used all drip under turf. Okay, so, and that was for almost a mile. So it's not this, when you're talking about a schoolyard, you're also talking about maintenance people that have a certain idea about what they think the water should be looking like as it comes out. Okay, so then that means the question is, do you get some water through drip or no water through pop-ups when that comes on? Did I see another hand over here? No? Okay, so that's kind of the other part in here is going to drip everywhere. And of course, these systems have gotten better. I have a question to the audience. Has anybody tried to use a water softener on drip irrigation to kind of negate some of the calcium buildup? No? Because that's obviously kind of one of the issues is that the orifices on the drip irrigation can get clogged with calcium precipitation. So that's something that we have to be aware of. Yes, sir?
Well, wouldn't the heavy salts from the softened water kill the plants?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm just saying, or then maybe there's. Okay, great, wonderful. See, that's the type of thing we should be sharing with each other. Yes, you have a hand down? Okay, it's just that's your shoulder. Okay. I understand the shoulder deal. So all I'm saying is you can use drip under turf, and it's a little, I just saw a Rainbird, I'll get to you. I just saw a Rainbird demonstration where they have this little bit where it will show you if it will pop up under pressure. It's at the end of the line, and it'll pop up under pressure that shows you if that drip irrigation is working. And so that's kind of another little piece. Again, the technology is getting a little bit better. Yes, sir? If it's drip, you don't. Yeah, you basically, that's why I had this project, this right-of-way project, and the installation, it was during stage 2, nobody else could water, because I had the whole thing in drip. They said, fine. So, I'm sorry? I can't hear you. Oh, maybe so. I have no idea. All I'm saying is that I think we're going to be pressed to change how our landscapes look and how we're providing water to them. So different mulches, again, gravel if it's being retained and not, washing away, and, basic hardwood mulch, kind of looking, that's what I really can't show you here, but as you know, putting mulch on top of the drip irrigation so that it's not exposed to UV rays is important. And, keeping the moisture in. When we went to stage 2 a few years ago, it shocked me that there was no education that came out for the homeowner that said, please mulch, it's going off in 3 weeks. Okay, in 3 weeks you're only going to be able to water once a week. And there was no education about putting mulch on a landscape to retain your moisture. So just think of all the landscapes that really suffered around town. I mean, it is an expense to put that in, but it maybe could have saved 50% of the landscapes at that point in time. So to me, drip irrigation and mulch should be like the education, the main education piece that should be going out, besides the potable water source. Yes, ma'am. There's we're in a big conundrum, and I couldn't agree more about what's happening with people in water delivery at AWU, LCRA, water policy, people making those decisions and not talking to the people on the ground in the landscape and irrigation industry. I think that I think it's a crime how it's been happening, and I just said this yesterday to the new city council because they're having a new water task force, and I'm hoping that somebody from the landscape and irrigation industry gets appointed to that task force instead of just policy people. I see. Well, they really, I would just, what needs to happen is there needs to be regional, but they don't communicate with each other. If I talk to, I shouldn't be, but it's frustrating for me as a landscape architect to talk to someone at the city and say, well, if you know their regulations, please send them to us. Well, maybe you might be the one to try to do it. You're on staff, right? But they don't. So it will take all of us to make that change. Is there another question, hand? Yes. Hey, Elizabeth.
I just want to make something that we could do more proactively outside of just the politics is that instead of designing landscapes that need to be watered every 2 to 3 days to look good, instead we design them, we restore them, prep the soil and everything and plant the right plants so that they can go for a month. Just be watered once a month and still look good. And it's definitely possible to do that. And then in that case, we kind of save ourselves.
Certainly, that's a big component, no doubt. I think that we all just kind of have to come at it from different angles. But yes, you're right. It's the landscape and irrigation industry touches a lot of places, like Home Depot that still provides the plants that require a lot of water, right? And so it's pretty wide-reaching what you have to do to change that culture, in Central Texas, right? So when somebody tells a landscape contractor, we need something in this afternoon, and they go to Home Depot, what can they do, right? There's just a lot of pressure from a lot of different directions. But certainly the Wildflower Center is a great resource for native plants and water-tolerant plants, drought-tolerant plants. Okay. So I'm going to just summarize here. So we need to preserve our existing trees and vegetated cover. And if you're on a job site, just talking to the builder about that is just as important as what they're going to do afterwards, right? To say, okay, or even talking to the owner about what the builder is doing in terms of what they're destroying, right? That doesn't have to be revegetated, just preserving what existing trees and vegetative cover we can. Installing new trees in some of these innovative green landscape treatments. Resources as much as possible, and use of efficient irrigation methods. I think we've got to use it from all sources, and as Elizabeth was saying, we know about more about the native landscapes, but some of these other water-related sources, alternatives, we need to start spending more time over there. So thank you. This is how you can get in touch with me if anybody has any other questions.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. We really appreciate your help today. That was wonderful. All right, folks, we've got time for a 15-minute break. I'd like everybody to be back here at, let's say actually 2:40. We'll have you guys back here. I'm sorry, 2:35. Sorry about that, 2:35. And real quickly, there are plant guides up front if anybody would like some. We'd like to emphasize that those who've signed up for the entire series go first in getting those. There's also design templates as well, and those are up front where you signed in. Please do, if you want to grab your coat, you're welcome to go check out the City Hall landscaping and wildlife habitat up front as well. Thank you. Back here, fresh coffee, please be back at 2:35. Thank you all.